Good afternoon and welcome. I'm glad you're here for the second annual NC Climate Week. I'm Heather Beard, the Executive Director for Earthshare North Carolina. Climate Week is about taking action to adopt known solutions to climate change and create resiliency, both as individuals and as professionals. And as you, I'm sure, remember, Hurricane Helene hit Western North Carolina 1 year ago. And just underscoring the urgency that everyone has to play a role in avoiding the largest impacts of climate change. So, once again, thank you for embracing that and being here today. Throughout the week, we're going to learn about how to overcome barriers to taking action, be inspired by the commitment and information that climate leaders share with us, and create a bigger network of people taking action on climate. So at the end of the call, I'm going to share some of the activities taking place throughout the week. So hang on for that. But for now, I want to introduce Daniel Pate, Director of Engagement with North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association. Daniel's also one of the advisors that created this program. So Daniel, thank you.
Thanks, Heather, and super glad to be here to moderate this panel titled Strengthening Corporate and Community Resiliency Through Deployment of Microgrids, where in this panel, we're going to learn about the role of microgrids in promoting the resiliency of communities as well as corporations. So we're going to hear from our speakers today on information on the basics of microgrids, kind of provide a high-level education session on the technology, as well as listen to some Helene recovery stories that use microgrids. And then we'll also hear some guidance on how each sector, what they can do to pursue leveraging this technology. So I'm super excited to be here for this great uh, list of our lineup of speakers that we have. All of them going to provide super interesting stories and perspectives so we can learn more about microgrids and especially how they've really been a key part of the recovery strategy for Hurricane Helene, which now has been about 1 year since that's happened. So when we were planning the panels, we figured this would be a good time to visit this topic and just learn about how the technology has played a key role in the recovery process. And particularly since microgrids have gotten more attention and even more funding as a strategy for disaster recovery, particularly last month, DEQ announcing that it's investing $5 million in permanent and mobile microgrids to provide accessible power in the wake of future weather disasters in North Carolina. And I know NCSEA was a part of that, as well as Footprint Project, which we have Will here from Footprint, and he's going to dive more into his story. So without further ado, I want to get started because we have so much content packed into this panel. And we will start off with Jake Grove from PowerSecure, and he is going to give us some information to help us demystify microgrids, in particular, exactly what they are, how they work, and why they're important. So, Jake, why don't you kick it off for us and start with an intro of yourself?
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Daniel. And very happy to be here today. So, Jake Grove with Power Secure. So, we're part of the Southern Company. We're on the deregulated side of their company, kind of coming up on our 25-year anniversary. And we are US leader when it comes to microgrids, roughly 2.8 gigawatts install base across the country. Uh, Roughly 2,700 sites. So we've been doing microgrids probably before people even knew what microgrids were, and it's just been great to kind of dive into this space a little over 4 years ago and just see how it's taken off, and it's now becoming not just something people don't really know about. It's everybody all across the world understanding the importance of microgrids and how they can serve just so many different market sectors. So kind of diving right in. So here you'll see our campus. We're situated right here in North Carolina, Durham to be specific. So was very blessed and fortunate to be asked to be part of this panel, knowing that right here in the triangle, and we've kind of been in this energy space, and it's been amazing just to see how it's grown not only across the country but right here in our own backyard. Just kind of jumping in with some microgrid 101. So said I joined this space a little over 4 years ago, and first time I heard the word microgrid, never heard of it before. Didn't know if it was one words, two words, if there was a hyphen in there. So once I found out how to actually spell it, I kept searching for what are these things? How do they work? How do they operate? And it felt like everywhere I went, you talk to 10 different people and you get 10 different definitions of what a microgrid is. But then I came across this one from IEEE that I thought just kind of hit it dead on of what the criteria is that satisfies classifying something as a microgrid. So kind of first and foremost, it has to be a group of interconnected loads and distributed energy resources that satisfies all of the following criteria. So I think that's very important that it must satisfy all of the below. It has to be within clearly defined electrical boundaries. It has to act as a single controllable entity with respect to the grid. It has the capabilities to connect and disconnect from the grid to enable to operate not only in both a grid connected or running in parallel with the grid, but also an island mode where it's completely disconnected from the grid, and that clearly defined electrical boundary that's able to be controlled is now able to serve its entire load from on-site generation resources. And finally, another really important aspect is time, not only for how long it takes to start and operate, but also the time duration that it can serve that operation. So we've kind of seen this expand over the last couple of years as resiliency and reliability have become of utmost importance, whether that's for business continuity or kind of disaster proofing for hurricanes, floods, you name it. But kind of the rule of thumb that I've seen out there is being able to sustain operations, all of the three above that met, and being able to do it for at least 24 hours. Then kind of just a really nice summary that I saw from Wood Mac that I think kind of summarizes couple different things that folks on the call here might know today, a virtual power plant or residential solar plus storage, and then larger backup gens or generator farms. And you can kind of see how they all those different things overlap. Some of them have scale, they have big size to them, they're able to island a little bit, maybe they have some control, but really the only thing that hits all three, as well as the criteria we just went over on the left, is microgrids from having scale, islanding, and control capabilities. So now that we are experts in Microgrid 101, I think it's good to kind of go through some things that we might be more familiar with in our day-to-day lives and why they do not classify as microgrids, kind of looking through the corporate lens here. So whether you have a smaller Generac backup generator behind your house, or it's your local Target, Walmart, or even a hospital that just has a traditional standby only, meaning it only runs when there is no utility power, that would not be considered a microgrid because it doesn't have a clearly defined electrical boundary. It doesn't act as controllable. It only runs when the grid is gone, never in parallel with the grid. And it has, as such, it has no ability to switch between that grid connected and the islanded mode. If you're looking at just kind of a traditional solar application without storage, that would not classify because it can't island during a grid outage. Solar is great, it's an amazing resource, but obviously if the sun goes behind a cloud, you can lose a significant portion of your solar generation. So it's not able to be that firm, hit that time standpoint of 24 hours. It's not controllable as we touched. If the sun goes behind a cloud, you don't really have solar operation. And it doesn't provide that continuous service independent of the grid. And then kind of looking at just a traditional utility distribution circuit, maybe it's serving your neighborhood or a small town or a store. It doesn't have any clearly defined independent electrical boundary. It's more part of the macro grid, not a microgrid in this case. And as such, it has no autonomy to disconnect and self-operate or just only serve what's behind that feeder or where that's connecting into. It's kind of taking all that into account. Just thought it'd be very nice to kind of bring together, okay, how can this come together? What is building a microgrid and what does that look like? So in this case, we're going to look at a distribution center, a nice little Whole Foods, or you pick your favorite local neighborhood market in your area. You have that switchgear with the microgrid controls, which is essential for integrating all of the resources together, making sure they're talking to each other, and optimizing to ensure that you're getting the lowest cost energy, whether that's the grid, whether that's hard in the asset grounds here with a diesel or a natural gas gen, integration of battery energy storage and solar, all connected back to a central monitoring room. So you're getting real-time live analytics on your system, every start, every stop, every alarm, all the way down to the nuts and bolts of the key components. And then most importantly, that utility connection. And then I will turn that over to Will then to let him share a little bit about some of the exciting work that he's doing in the microgrid space.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks, Jake. And
Jake.
I'll do a quick transition before we get to Will. But props to you, Jake, for the interactive visuals. And we will go back to Jake to dive more into that corporate aspect of microgrids. But yeah, now we're going to hand it over to Will. We are so glad to have him on the panel today as we turn to more of a community lens, as Will very much has plenty of stories to tell regarding how his organization has been mobilizing efforts in North Carolina and throughout the country to deploy mobile solar units in disaster-struck areas. So, Will, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks. I am just gonna share my screen here and hopefully, can you all see that? It's the right one. Okay, cool.
Yes.
I'm just gonna slideshow. Alrighty. Well, it's really a privilege to be here today with these awesome partner panelists and excited to dive in a little bit to kind of all the different approaches to deploying this equipment and these new technologies for those varied goals. Footprint Project's mission is to help communities build back greener after disasters by mobilizing cleaner energy infrastructure to crises. We have like three main programs during power outage disasters across the domestic US. We rapidly deploy mobile microgrid solar generators, solar trailers, basically anything that's not a fossil fuel generator to power up critical resilience hub facilities, tents, shelters, you name it. When the lights are back on, we develop fleets of community mobile solar microgrids and train locals to plug in. And then we also integrate donations into our fleets and into our programs to help reduce the cost of microgrids. So really when the lights are out, we're deploying, we're assessing, we're setting up, we're maintaining, and the equipment stays as long as you need it. And then during blue skies, we're designing and building and training and planning and donating and hopefully seeding opportunities for more folks to do what we do. Just going to talk briefly about the technologies. Jake gave a great overview of what a microgrid is. I think we are kind of in the smallest of the smallest lens of that. Most folks talk about megawatt hours or gigawatt hours. We're usually in kilowatt hours, but really it's just a range of different mobile, renewable, solar, and battery systems of various sizes, plus efficient technologies, appliances, and other kind of integrated stuff that can help responders and community members when the lights are out. Just briefly on our response timeline, we kind of do from the response from when the disaster hits to when the kind of the community is able and kind of back. We think about back to baseline a lot in this work. I think the reality is that it's hard to see baseline in our current era of recurring compounding climate and extreme weather emergencies, but there is a life cycle to a response, and we try to think about it in terms of kind of days to weeks, weeks to months, and months to years. I'm just going to talk about briefly about some of the key sites that, or like example spots that were really successful and really impactful after Hurricane Helene. This solar and battery trailer, that's a Tesla palletized microgrid and about 10 kilowatts of solar on that trailer there. This was deployed with a partner, Pate Emma, in a mobile home community after I think we got this one up on Sunday after the storm, so it was one of our first sites. It was to power a well pump right. If you're looking at the right picture, it was right behind me when I took that picture, and that well pump was then able to provide water to thousands of people in the area. They started backing up trucks and filling the water trucks up to supply both water to this mobile home and then mobile home park and distribute it to other mobile home parks around the area. This is right on the river. The floodwaters were up to about those stairs on the right, and you can see some oxygen tanks by a community member that was still in this house to the right. And this is another microgrid we set up just on the ground here to support community members living in their homes at that time still, which was a little spicy, for just powering fans and mold remediation and kind of the basic power needs that people would use to gut their homes after flooding. And then this is a base camp for a volunteer, kind of groups of volunteers that were deployed up in Pensacola, up on the top of the mountain, to support communities farther up the mountains. And the fridges in that trailer were when I got to see the site a couple weeks after this deployment, it was filled with medication and hot dogs. So it was a combination of food and kind of insulin or other medication donations. Um, I won't talk through all these quotes, but I just to give you a sense of kind of like how people use various technologies in a disaster. This was a site that was using them for just kind of basic plugs for CPAPs and oxygen. In this case, the folks were using them for just lights and to turn off their generator when they're sleeping, which can be risky from a carbon monoxide standpoint, but also just really, if you've ever stayed or slept or lived off of a generator for a while, it can get very annoying to try to keep your blood pressure down when that thing is just constantly running in the background. And then this is a slightly funnier one, but I mean, coffee is important, and it's the little things, hot water, and can be really important in places, moments of intense collective trauma. These numbers are a little old, but we have been, we were active in the early days. I think we're actually even more active now in the Western North Carolina region. We were able to hire local staff to maintain a lot of the assets that we were using, deploying, and then also expand on the long-term recovery work. So we opened an office in warehouse in Mars Hill. We're at 2 full-time staff, soon to be 3 next month. We have a free store for donating solar panels and other microgrid technology components to recovery projects, and then we're actively kind of stewarding, shepherding, or I'd say like almost like case managing microgrid projects for sites that served as resilience hubs after the storm to try to get them their own solar and battery microgrid tech so that they can do their own, island, maintain their operation, not worry about gas, and then focus on serving the community when they really need to be focused on doing what they're best at. We are building out, so we're building out more microgrid infrastructure. We're growing our mobile fleet through the grant that Daniel you mentioned earlier in the call in the this talk with support from the Department of Environmental Quality, and we are continuing to support free requests for power as much as possible. And I just wanted to mention the DEQ microgrid resiliency project because it is kind of the big thing that we're doing now in Western North Carolina, and we're looking for lots of partners and just getting the word out and looking for input. So we have to install 24 stationary solar and storage microgrids in these 6 counties. Hoping to announce the first projects soon. We have a long list of applicants, and I'll share the links for applying in the chat. We have to build 2 mobile beehive microgrids to serve as regional clean tech lending libraries, one in Western North Carolina and one in Eastern North Carolina. So just briefly, bees are solar trailers that do different things, and a hive is a place where the bees can park, stage, and ideally provide power back and forth when they're sitting and waiting for a deployment. This is the first beehive that we're working on in New Orleans, and then we have to do 2 more now in North Carolina with support from DEQ. So I'll throw these forms in the chat later, and we can share these slides afterwards for anyone that's interested. But there are a number of ways to get involved in this recovery project. So if you're an vendor or installer, if you're a technical advisor, if you just want to shout and share where you think we should go with this, please click the forms. And I'm just looking forward to discussing the broader challenge of providing resilient, equitable power to folks that need it of all shapes and sizes when the lights are out. Because I think it's a collective problem. None of us are going to solve it alone. And with new technology, there's always a double-edged sword, right? Brings pros and cons and complications and benefits. And I think the more people we can get around the table to think about how to provide electrons to the folks that need them most when the lights are out, the better work we can all do together. So thanks for listening to me ramble, and I'll pass it on.
Thanks, Will. Super amazing work that you and your organization is doing. And thanks for the use of photos as well. I think that really helps tell the story as well. And it just goes to show you, I think, the versatility, the type of roles, different roles that microgrids can play in various applications, whether it's community focused or corporation focused. I'll also remind everyone that if you have any questions for any of our panelists, you can pop that into the Q&A box and we will make sure that those get addressed. Okay, well, we are going to keep the community theme going now with Rob from Christmount Christian Assembly. And he also has some very compelling stories to tell about serving residents in Helene-stricken areas. So, Rob, I will pass it on over to you.
All right. Thank you very much. Wow. I mean, my gosh, William and Jake, those are such incredible stories and resources and great things to share. I'm just honored to be a part of this panel, part of this discussion, part of the process. So I'm coming at it from I guess a user end scale of things. So I'm going to share my screen as well, and let's see. There we go. So we'll talk a little bit about microgrid golf carts at Christmount. So we're a conference center in Western North Carolina in Black Mountain. We were hit pretty hard by Helene a year ago. We're a year into recovery with probably several more years of recovery left to go. So I'll tell you a little bit about, shoot, it's not going to advance. Having trouble with the advance. Let's see. Well, I'm going to back out and try this again, y'all. Let's see. All right. See the screen. There we go. Here we go. Our next presentation is on technology itself. So we're a conference center in Black Mountain. We're a camp, we're a neighborhood, and we have our own utilities here at Christmount. So I'll tell you a little bit about those and then about how we responded to Helena here at the end. Here at the camp, just to give you an idea of kind of what we do, we run adapted camping programs for campers with autism and adults with intellectual disabilities. And so we run those in the summertime, camping programs, and then year-round social groups as well. We host a lot of community events, stuff for folks locally. We have 9 hiking trails that are open to the public. We have a conservation easement with Southern Appalachia Highland Conservancy. We're on a historical site with the Rafael Guastavino estate. And then we have, on occasion, as needed, provided housing for evacuees from natural disasters. And so that's just some of what we do on the campsite. The neighborhood and community, we've got 90 private homeowners that rely on Christmount for what they call home. We host community events for the local Kiwanis and Rotary clubs. Organization called Mercy Chefs has been with us for about a year, helping out with hurricane recovery efforts. We work with Black Mountain Parks and Rec, Town of Black Mountain, Elon University. We've partnered with their School of Engineering to for their senior projects. Hemlock Restoration Initiative is a local organization that we work with, Girls on the Run International, and then Overeaters Anonymous, Al-Anon. So those are just kind of give you an idea of some of the broader scope of the folks that we work with. And then onto the utilities side, we have 3 wells, a treatment house, and a storage tank that provides potable water for the 90 homeowners. We take care of the sewer services, roads, and trash services for the folks around the neighborhood. And that's all the water and sewer is governed by the North Carolina Utilities Commission. And those are the services that we provide for the residents themselves. So on to microgrids. We kind of came to this game a little bit late. Man, I wish we had known about the services that Jake and Will are into, because man, what a fantastic resource. And so I think in late 2023, we embarked on our first microgrid golf cart application. And so we converted a regular club car into a microgrid with the help of Keith Thompson and some folks over at Warren Wilson College. We kind of partnered with those folks to build a microgrid work vehicle. And so this is what that is. It's basically a golf cart that runs on solar energy. You take out the golf cart batteries, you put in a lithium ion battery, and you've got yourself a working power grid vehicle that works off the solar. And so what's really just fantastic about something like this is that these go from becoming just a golf cart to becoming a utility vehicle in all respects. And so it's something that you can use to power devices, cell phones, for example, tools. You can plug in just whatever you need to operate. And so it allows you to have power during crisis situations, during bad weather events like Helene, things like that, where you're without. And so we did our first one. The picture on the left there is the conversion of our first cart in 2023, late 2023. And then since then we've done one more. We're hoping to do several more, and then really rely on some of these other resources that Will and Jake are talking about in terms of building out our microgrid capabilities here as a conference center. So the main thing I want to, I guess, just touch on for folks is that, by having something like microgrids, it allows conference centers to really operate in a more versatile and functional way for the community. It allows us to be an emergency hub for evacuees during natural disasters. For example, in 2017, we provided housing for Hurricane Irma evacuees. And in 2021, for a family of 13 who fled Afghanistan for political reasons. And so, in those situations, Christmount already had power off the grid. But in situations like Helene, we'd like to be more equipped and better prepared to serve when the us and the community doesn't have power itself. And so that's one of the things that we're working towards, and we want to encourage other, conference centers or schools or community centers to consider taking steps and partnerships with organizations like the two that we're talking with on this panelist today. And so the last little slide I want to share with you guys, I want to give a little shout out to Keith Thompson, who helped us kind of get things going. This is an article that was online in December of 23. And I just love the quote here that part of the cost of the tractor project came from a $50,000 grant from the band Pearl Jam. One of the members of the Critical Services Microgrid group has ties to the band and helped secure the grant as part of the band's environmental and sustainability commitment. Who knew? Who knew? But that just goes to show that it's always about who you know, or who you know who knows somebody that's got those connections and ties. So could be somebody in a band like Pearl Jam. So, but just good work is going on out there. So again, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this discussion with you guys.
Thanks, Rob. Maybe we can get Pearl Jam to do a solar powered concert in North Carolina at some point, but that's a super cool story. And I was not even aware that the idea of golf cart serving as a microgrid before I heard the story from you. So I guess that just goes to show the creativity that can happen in a community when faced with disasters like Helene. So thanks so much for being here today and for telling that story. And next we will go back to the corporate angle, going back to Jake from PowerSecure. And now Jake is going to dive into microgrids, how they can contribute to corporate and business resiliency. So take it away, Jake.
All righty, pull my slides back up here. Yeah, so kind of looking at it from the corporate angle a little bit, and kind of specifically what PowerSecure is seeing out there in the market. We really try and build every single project that we work with on a customer on what we call the 3 Rs as our foundation, and determining, is a microgrid the right fit for this customer and their short and long-term goals. Because there's a lot of businesses out there, whether it be a retail center, a hospital, a data center, that resiliency is key. They need to keep the lights on. So everybody needs backup power in those cases, but not everybody needs a microgrid. It's a solution-based approach. So kind of looking at it as return on investment, resiliency, and then reduced emissions. That's kind of the 3 Rs that we want to build all of our projects on when working with our end users. And if two of those strike a chord with somebody, it's probably a really good case for a microgrid project. And then even better if it strikes all three, and that's kind of the gold mine, and it's somebody that very well aligns with the business proposition for microgrid solutions. So real quick, we'll just kind of walk through two of what I'll call more of our poster child projects out there. First one right here, this is a 25 megawatt microgrid that we integrated and installed in 2016 for the Marine Corps Air Station in Yuma. Now, I'm not sure if anybody on the call knows too much about this facility, but it's actually the most secure Air Force base in the entire country, and it's situated at the end of the California ISO. So out there in Yuma, Arizona, all the way at the end of the line. If you know anything about the California ISO, it actually has the most amount of renewables on their grid across the entire country. So Yuma being all the way at the end of the line, where they were doing a lot of very critical, detailed operations and kind of flight paths for. This is where they have all of the stealth bombers and secret mission jets out there. where they're actually programmed with computers, and it goes and it runs out all of their test routes and practice routes, and they're collecting terabytes of data. However, as we touched on, solar battery renewables are great, but if you have too much of anything, it cannot be the best solution. And in this case, if sun goes behind a cloud in California on the California, so quite literally hundreds of megawatts can roll offline. And what was happening at Yuma with them experiencing it the worst, being all the way at the end of the California ISO here, they were getting a lot of under frequency events where the jets would be coming back from their missions, and maybe the glycol that they were pumping straight into the jets when it hit a 120-degree runway in Arizona, or at their critical operations center, there was these blips in power that was causing them to lose quite literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars of critical data from these classified test missions they were piloting. So we actually worked with their local utility company out there, Arizona Public Service, longtime utility customer of PowerSecure's, and we created a new mode of operation for our microgrids called autonomous frequency response. So our 25 megawatts here with our always ready generation is autonomously watching the grid and the frequency of it. And if there's any slight deviation, our system comes online expecting there to be an under frequency event. And as we know, microgrids do now, it actually runs in parallel with the grid. And then if it starts getting a little bit further outside of that bandwidth, it autonomously disconnects from the grid, and our microgrid provides 100% standby power to the facility, so they don't have any more blips, they're not losing any more data, and their network operation center is 24/7, 365, fully online and backed up. So kind of all that to say that the value of frequency response on the California ISO was so high and so lucrative, especially for this system and what type of work was being done there, that the revenue that they were able to generate in the market from having this resource on their site was able to have this microgrid be provided zero capex, so 100% fully paid for. So in this case, we got a customer that resiliency was obviously key. We struck a big chord there, and then even more so, the return on investment, not having to pay a single dollar out of pocket over the lifetime of this system. And kind of the next one here, this is a technology campus. Some folks on the call here today may know this futuristic spaceship looking campus out there, might even have something from them in your pocket here today. But this was a super interesting project because this customer, they said, we want to build this new campus, and this plot of land is the only place that we're going to do it. You can clearly see why. It's in a very beautiful setting, but the huge issue was that they were in a very constrained area in right outside of a major metropolitan area. So as such, the utility infrastructure that was in place could not support the peak load or how much power they were going to have to use at this campus. And they said, hey, we can only get you 10 megawatts of prime utility service, no more. And if you want to have your campus here, we understand you're going to be at 20, 24 megawatts peak load on a given day and what type of processes you're running. So if you want this campus here, you're going to have to figure out how to implement a microgrid type solution or something to offset or augment your power to keep it below what we're able to provide on the utility end. So that's where we came in to the picture, and you can kind of see a number of different sources here. It's actually touted as the most advanced microgrid project in the entire country still today. It's at a couple megawatts of generators. They want to have some EV charging, solar, battery energy storage, and fuel cells. And we integrated all of that through our switch here and microgrid controller to the point where it keeps it under that 10 megawatt threshold that they're capped at with the utility. And this site actually comes on and off the grid multiple times per day to ensure they stay below that 10 megawatt threshold. But even more so, you can kind of see with the solar battery fuel cell to ensure that they're optimizing not only their energy use, but dispatching the resource and using the resource that's going to be the most economic based on the time of day. So in this case, we got a gold mine here, and there was a customer that resiliency was key to them. They were doing a lot of very intense processes here. They're probably doing AI before we even knew what AI was. So resiliency was of utmost importance. The return on investment was huge. They wanted to be able to have it at this specific spot only, and this was the only one of the only solutions that could get them there. And then reduced emissions. They had very aggressive sustainability goals, which drove the integration of the renewable sources for this customer. So kind of looking at two cases and heard a little bit about what microgrids are and what they aren't. Every single customer is going to have kind of different hot buttons or what drives them to make that decision to not only just have standby power resources on sites, or to make that jump and say we want a forward thinking, very diverse, robust system. We want to get into microgrids. So that's resilience from keeping the lights on during those blackouts. Clearly critical for a number of customers, hospitals, military bases, data centers, as we saw here today. It also gives kind of the end users or the communities a form of energy independence. You can kind of pick and choose how to align your long-term investments and your sustainability goals and integrate those resources, whereas you're always relying on the grid and kind of the resource mix that you don't really have too much of a say over. You get much more independence to choose what resources you have on site and how your facility is powered. We're seeing a lot of folks come out with aggressive sustainability goals, whether that's 2030, 40, 50. And what we have today on the fossil fuel side, you're just not going to get there. So a lot of people are turning towards integration of renewables to help them get closer to those sustainability goals. And as we saw in kind of the two use cases today, if you have specific generation on site that can be running in parallel with the grid and can be called on by the utility in those peak times, you can actually be rewarded in compensation, and it can actually lower your bills. So some customers, they're looking at it not only as a nice way to achieve their sustainability and reliability resiliency goals, but also creating a nice form of revenue for them. And then as we kind of heard here today from the other two panelists as well, and that when the grid is strained or when you have those weather events that you can't predict, if you have those hard resources on site, you are much more weatherproof and you actually have much more kind of, you don't have to rely on the grid. So there's a number of different hot buttons for what could push a customer towards a microgrid solution. And these are just a few of the ones that we've seen coming up more and more of why people are making that jump to microgrids. Turn it back over to you, Daniel.
Thanks, Jake, for diving into the corporate aspect of microgrids for us. And hopefully everyone has been able to take away information on the value of microgrids from the corporate and the community aspect, and really appreciate these very knowledgeable speakers coming to the panel today to provide their perspectives. So we have a few minutes left, a few minutes dedicated to Q&A. So I think there were a few questions that have been put into the Q&A box. So I will look at them and delegate the questions where I think it makes sense. The first one is from Jamie. This one goes to Will. Jamie asks, how did Footprint Project connect with Poder Emma?
Yeah. I like to think about it. It's like a mycelium of people and groups across the domestic U.S. So we got connected to Poder Emma by our board member, Sam Childress, who's Schneider Electric microgrid person, who went to App State. We were driving northeast from New Orleans with a solar trailer, and she said, you go to Asheville. I have friends, we have people there, we know people there. I can get you in touch with Critical Services Microgrid Group, which is a group that Rob, you alluded to, Keith Thompson, and those folks were based in Asheville, driving electric vehicles around to do aid right in the first days after the storm, and they're an awesome network of microgrid experts. So we connected with them, and then we met up with them in Asheville on I think Saturday or Sunday after the storm, and they were like, they saw the trailer that we were hauling. They were like, this could be used at a well pump at Pate Emma's mobile home park. And boom, they connected us. And then we were there the next day. And that's when we met Ingrid and set up that system. And then they connected us to 3 other groups. And then just catch this, like in many cases, this stuff starts to snowball. And I guess in the best way, for some spirals are positive and some spirals are negative, and those are the positive ones that make all the difference. So
Thanks, Will. We have a question from Kelly. I believe this goes to you, Will. She asks, do you think Ocracoke will be a location for one of the beehives in eastern North Carolina?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't gotten to the Eastern North Carolina assessments or site selection yet. That's going to be likely early next year. But if you're a great way to propose, there's 2 ways to try to get sites or regions on the radar for the Eastern North Carolina beehive. One, you could fill out the public comment feedback form and just be like, hey, y'all should really be thinking about putting this here because it doesn't flood too much, but it floods a lot, or this region has a lot of people that could use it. Whatever, like all intel is good intel. And then if you have a specific facility that is a community benefit site, so a nonprofit or a health center, federally qualified health center or something, rural fire station, that you're like, this group needs a microgrid and it's in those 6 counties, you can fill out the microgrid request form. You could also fill it out for another site because we are looking for funding to expand this across the state. So just a heads up, you could fill it out for every fire station in North Carolina. That's a lot of work. God bless you if you want to do that much work and if you can. But the more sites requests we can get into the request form, the more momentum we can show. We want hundreds of sites on that list because then we can take it to the state and to private philanthropy and other investors and say, hey, there's this much demand for this equipment and this work. We need to scale the funding. We don't need 5 million, we need 50. We don't need 50 million, we need 500. This is a long road to doing infrastructure resilience across the state, and it's a all hands on deck. So yeah, please fill out the forms. I know it takes time, but it really is the only way for us to present a good case to the network for, hey, we need to be scaling this investment.
Thanks, Will. And I think you get another one. Sorry, maybe you should feel so lucky. But how do you decide where to build microgrid capacity when a storm hits?
Oh man, I think that's a Jake question to be honest. Maybe not when the storm hits part, but how do you decide where to do microgrid capacity is definitely a Jake question. Above my pay grade. When a storm hits, it's a combination of who needs what, like people triage, what equipment do we have available and will it meet their need? So it's like we're really just trying to match make appropriate tech with appropriate need. We don't want to be deploying fancy microgrids to a group that's not going to really utilize, like we all know who, when you see it, like that volunteer aid station that's serving thousands of people a day and running on a gas generator with shoestring budget, they're the groups that like we know this stuff can really change the game for. So yeah, we do a lot of assessment, but at the end of the day, it's, do we have the right thing, and is the partner doing something that makes sense for that piece of a technology? Because as Jake, you know this better than I do, like this stuff is complicated. And it doesn't, just because we say we have a thing, doesn't mean it's the right fit for every site.
Yeah, Jake, if you could hit on it from the corporation standpoint. I know you hit on a few different factors in your presentation, like I remember utility caps, but maybe if you could summarize again, high level, what makes for an ideal location for a business microgrid.
Yeah, I don't in my experience it's not really location driven. I'll say as much I'd say it's more so customer and industry driven from what we see. It's I don't think a microgrid here or there is better. Obviously, if you're in more of a kind of storm corridor or an area where you could be more susceptible to utility outages or extreme weather events, you would definitely want to start thinking more about how can I kind of harden my load here? How can I kind of be more resilient on site? But it's in my experience not really this location versus that location. It's more customer driven. And obviously, as you said, Will, kind of funding is a huge part of it, but even more so, it is a very complex idea to figure out. It's not easy. There's a lot of moving pieces. So I think that part of it is location and industry driven, but even more so kind of the use case. I think microgrids are amazing and I wish everybody would kind of adopt them, but it just doesn't fit as well or pencil as well or make as much sense for kind of certain industries. If you desire resiliency, reliability, you're probably a very good candidate for it right out of the start. If your business thrives on having the lights on, you're somebody who would definitely want to start looking at potential microgrid solutions for whatever kind of campus or area you're in.
Thanks, Jake. I think we got time for one more question before I turn it back over to Heather. And I'm not going to let Rob get off the hook. So I will dedicate set this question up for Rob. Just a general call to action question. Uh, what can the public do to make the case for more microgrids in their community?
Mm. I say you're doing it right here. Get involved with events like Climate Week, North Carolina, or North Carolina Climate Week. Reach out to folks like Jake and Will. Um, you know, it's all about connecting the dots in your community, and the bigger you can draw the circle, the better. So I think that's really what it's all about is that these big problems require big solutions. And those always require lots and lots of voices and people at the table. And so it's a matter of putting all the pieces together to come up with these types of solutions. So what these guys are doing is nothing short of incredible. And I just encourage everybody to help spread that far and wide. That's what it's going to take. I'm going to reach out to these guys myself to see what we can do here, not only at Christ Mount, but in Black Mountain and Western North Carolina on a bigger scale.
Yeah, that's great. That's what it's all about, making the connections.
Mm, yeah.
Well, I just want to send out words of appreciation to our speakers today, Will, Jake, and Rob. Thanks so much for joining us and telling your stories about microgrids and helping us learn about them and also learn about what we can do to make the case for them. So with that, I will turn it over to Heather.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you to all of you. What a wonderful session, and yes, make the circle bigger. That's what NC Climate Week is all about. So I just want to invite you on the phone to take advantage of all the week has to offer. There are 10 climate action workshops, a career showcase that only has 5 spots left in it, so do that quickly if you want to. Consulting sessions that are offered on the website. So take a look, but I do want to let you know the next workshop is tomorrow at 10 a.m. This one is changes in climate goals and reporting. climate commitments in a world of change. So I know that is top of mind for many businesses and communities. And also, I just want to let you know that the finale of NC Climate Week is the summit in Greensboro on Friday. And among the great pieces of content there, you'll see that there's a story, a panel on 3 stories of Helene at that summit. And so it's a continuation of what we started talking about today with people in the room, where you can continue the conversation together. So links to the workshop and the summit are in the chat, and we have a 5-question survey that we would love your participation in, as it helps us understand what we got out of today, what you got out of today, and helps us shape things going forward. So please go ahead and take that. It's probably a 3-minute or less activity. And as you go, you can work through it at your own pace and hop off the line when you are done. Thank you again for being here. Happy NC Climate Week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for having us. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Will.
Yeah, thanks again, everybody. Great panel. Looking forward to seeing you all on Friday.
Thanks. See y'all then.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. We're closing out. Have a good afternoon.